This meeting of the Starkville Board of Aldermen will now come to order. Please rise for the saying of the Pledge of Allegiance, to be followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, you have before you a copy of the written agenda, and I have a little housekeeping that I'll propose as revision. The minutes from February 6th need to be removed. They are not ready in full for adoption yet. The employee introduction needs to be removed as well. It couldn't be scheduled for this evening. And item 11J1. Says it's a report. It was erroneously placed on the agenda as a consent agenda item. Obviously, if there's a report to be given, it needs to be heard on the open agenda. Any objection to those changes? Any objection to those changes in the agenda? See?
Mayor, there's one other change.
All right.
Ms. Brule, were we going to strike?
Yes, it was the item N,
No.
Oh.
I was thinking about the police issue
I'm
first.
sorry, yes, and item number, sorry, 11I2, be removed
Well, we already meeting started.
until the next board meeting.
11.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry about my may I be recognized?
You may.
I'm sorry about my delinquency. Can we start over so I make sure I didn't miss anything?
Okay. Several modifications of the agenda were just made, and we were in the midst of another. The minutes for February 6th have been taken off of the agenda.
Okay,
The introduction of Robert Tomlinson has been taken off of the agenda.
okay.
And the report from Mr. Devlin, item 11J1, has been taken off of consent so that he can make his report.
Okay.
And we were in the midst of discussing item 11I, was it two? Removing that from consent,
No.
removing it completely from the agenda. So
11I.
without objection, that would be the removal of the request for authorization to apply for Homeland Security reimbursable grant in the amount of $14,921. Is there any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been removed from the agenda. Do we have any proposed revisions from the members of the board?
Mayor.
Alderman Corey.
So I had a chance today to speak to Mr. Charles Evans, who's been leading the project regarding the Needmore renaming. And after the action the board took at the last meeting regarding sort of renaming the general area Needmore Place, he is now in the process of talking with the committee as far as whether to even proceed with the actual street renaming. And so since that's up in the air and they're not sure yet if they're going to proceed with that or if they're going to leave it with the action the board took at the last meeting, I was going to remove just the latter half of E, leave the first part with the official municipal street map, and take off the part and changing the name of the street of Spring Street at least until Mr. Evans has had a chance to talk with the members of his committee and decide what they want to do with that.
So the proposed revision from Alderman Corey is to modify item 10E. To remove the last part, which refers to changing the name of Spring Street to Needmore Place. So that item would read, consideration of calling for a public hearing on an ordinance adopting the official municipal street map.
Right, and I'm going to meet with Mr. Evans some more between now and the next meeting and let the board know what the final decision is going to be on that and move forward as needed.
Do I hear any objection? Any
Well, I guess
objection?
If we're gonna, it was tailored to the, guess, we're gonna have discussion on that, right? We're adopting a map that's already current, right?
We're just calling for a public hearing, and the public hearing is on an ordinance regarding the adopting the official municipal street map.
This is in reference to the research that the city attorney did in preparation for the last meeting, where he discovered that all city street names need to be adopted by ordinance. That is cleaning up officially that practice by adopting one large ordinance for all of the city street names. But the proposed revision we're discussing is striking the second part of that agenda item,
Right.
which would take the discussion of Spring Street to Needmore Place off of the agenda. Is there any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter has been removed from the agenda. Do we have further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions?
I've got a few now.
Alderman
Anybody else
Davis?
has any, y'all can, I'll just start and we'll go from there. Under board business, I'd like to remove item C, the discussion regarding outside ordinance. We'll just take that matter of discussion up in the public hearing.
All right, proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to remove item 10C, which was a discussion regarding the adoption of the outside storage ordinance. Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been removed from the agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed
I
revisions?
do, under board business, item F, calling for a public hearing on the landscape ordinance. I'd like to place that on consent.
All right, Alderman Dumas has proposed placing item 10F, the consideration of calling for a public hearing on amending the landscape ordinance in the City of Starkville Code of Ordinances, Chapter 112, Article 2, as presented on the consent agenda. Is there any proposed, is there any objection? Any objection? Okay. So that item will remain on the open agenda. Alderman Dumas?
Okay. Item G, not the report from the budget and audit, but the consideration of approval outside contributions in the amount of 500 per organization. G1 to consent.
Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item G1, the approval of outside contributions to Volunteer Starkville, the Starkville Girl Scouts, and the Starkville Young Professionals in the amount of $500 per organization, with the submission of the proper application as presented onto the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
Yes.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
Under board business, item L to consent.
All right, the proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item 10L, the approval of in-kind services to the big truck event at the Starkville Sportsplex to benefit Volunteer Starkville as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent
Well,
agenda.
in our, and it may be, I mean, it doesn't even say on our e-packet what that is. I only got, unless something's wrong, my last modification, what is that? I mean, it doesn't say.
There's a public hearing that will be given tonight, and all those documents were included as part of that public hearing, or the public appearance by Ms. Jamie Mott, which is here tonight. So I will present that, but those documents were in that public hearing.
It's not in mine, it's,
And it's all in kind.
we're gonna have some discussion about it, so I'm fine with it.
Okay. So you're fine with it remaining on consent?
I'm fine.
All right. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed revisions?
I do. Item M, under board business, I'd like to add this to consent with Mr. William Snowden being hired at a salary of $75,000, and for that to start immediately.
Alderman Dumas has proposed revising the agenda to place the hiring of Mr. William Snowden as the Community Development Director at a salary of $75,000, and is there a benefit package? And with the appropriate benefit package, yeah. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Is to place that on consent.
That's correct.
I was a little ham-handed in my explanation of that. Is there any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda.
Under board business, item N, another calling for a public hearing. I'd like to place that on consent.
Actually, if I could, I asked Mr. Latimer a question late in the day, and he needs some additional time to research that, so if we could remove that for tonight.
Alderman Dumas, what's your proposal with respect to item 10N?
Remove it from the agenda.
All right, proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to remove item 10N from the agenda. Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, item 10N has been removed from the agenda. Further proposed revisions.
Under Community Development Department, under Code Enforcement, unless there is a need to discuss those finding of facts, are we good with placing A on the consent?
as outlined in the staff report.
Okay, as outlined on the staff report.
Well, and let me interject. You have one of those property owners that's going to be here tonight to ask for an extension. So I would ask that you leave at least that property off for discussion until you can hear their request for an extension.
Okay, which property is that?
That is the Jackson Street property, the Poe property.
Okay, well then I'd like to place A on consent with the 7 dilapidated properties as listed, with the finding of facts, removing the Jackson Street property.
Alderman Dumas has proposed revising
Poe property.
the agenda. Do we have another property owner here?
Yes, on, Lewis Street, 305.
Let's leave it on.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll just leave that on then.
All right. So it would be, your proposed revision is to remove the 6 properties, or is to place the 6 properties,
Just remove that, or just keep that,
Keep it on.
keep
keep
it as
that
an
on the
open
agenda.
agenda item.
Correct.
Got you. Alderman Dumas, do you have further
I
proposed?
do. Under planning, I'd like to place all 3 items with the 2 P and Z items, with 12 conditions on C, and I think it was 11 conditions. I'm looking that up right now. My iPad's frozen, so bear with me. Anybody have the number of conditions?
Conditions on the FP 1301.
Yeah, so 12 conditions on number C, and then under, on B, I can't get that item to
There were
come up.
nine
9 conditions on item.
PP 1301.
Okay, with 9 on B, 12 conditions on item 12. Yeah, with the 12th on the Dollar General item being the primary interest for access to the site shall align with the existing site, city street bridle path to the west. So I do want that one included.
All right, hold on. I'm gonna need some clarification. Is that one of the 12?
It is,
Okay, so,
and I think being enumerated as 12 is probably enough, but I just wanted to state it for the record.
Ward
Okay.
6. They're both in Ward 6 instead of the wards.
Correct,
all right, so both B and C should be Ward 6.
yes,
The
both
pro-
on consent.
The proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place items 11.3A, 11.3B, and 11.3C on the consent agenda. Those matters are as follows. The approval and adoption of the amended zoning map for the city of Starkville is recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission. The approval of P and Z item PP 13-01, a request by Freddie Raspberry for approval of the Owen subdivision, a preliminary plat located in an R5 multifamily high-density zoning district at the intersection of North Washington Street and Owens Drive in Ward 6. The approval of P and Z item number FP 13-01, a request by Thomas Allen for approval of the Dollar General plat located in the C2 General Business Zoning District at 1006 North Jackson Street in Ward 6. And those are as presented with the 9 conditions as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission with respect to item 11.3B, and with the 12 conditions as recommended by the Planning and Zoning Commission with respect to item 11.3C. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
Correct.
Do I hear any objection to placing those matters on consent? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, those matters have been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed
I do.
revisions?
I've got one under sanitation for sure. The sanitation approval of the rate scale, I'd like to put that on consent, or K1, sorry.
Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place item 11K1, the authorization to adopt a rate scale for dumping by the ton at the landfill as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection?
Object.
All right. Objection has been made, so that will remain on the open agenda.
And then, I must have skipped over this, under board business, item H, to consent. And after that, I have no further additions or changes.
Proposed revision from Alderman Dumas is to place the declaration of intent of the board to accept an as yet unnamed private street off of Azalea Lane as a public street with the completion of certain requirements by the property owners as presented on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, that's your proposed revision.
It is.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection, any objection, any objection? Seeing none, that matter's been placed on the consent agenda. Alderman Dumas, do you have further proposed
I
revisions?
do not.
Are there any further proposed revisions? Alderman Sistrum.
First, I want to be sure, since I was, my clock didn't agree with the city clock today. Item 10D, the consideration of amending our policy on exempting street naming, that's still open for discussion, is that right?
It is.
Okay, just to be sure. And I would like to reorder the agenda to move the item 14C, executive session, economic development pursuant to section 25-41-7, to item following approval of the official agenda, if we could, since we have people out of town here.
All right, the proposed revision from Alderman Sistrum is to place executive session item C at the front of the agenda, reordering the agenda to make that item 4, and putting each following Roman numeral in the appropriate order thereafter. Alderman Sistrum, is that your proposed revision?
It is.
Do I hear any objection?
I have no objection. Can we take that matter up in the conference room instead of vacating the room?
My preference would be here, but if
That's
y'all,
fine.
okay.
We don't have any chairs in the conference
Oh,
rooms.
that's right. We don't have, we stand.
Do I hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, that matter has been reordered to be item number Roman numeral 4. And do I hear any other proposed revisions? All right, a note needs to be made regarding 11E3. The city attorney had some final revisions to that contract, so that matter is on the consent agenda, but it needs to be noted that that is the final contract that was presented on the table. Is there any objection to so revising the agenda? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the agenda will so reflect the change. Any further proposed revisions from the members of the board? Any further proposed revisions? Any further proposed revisions? And seeing none, a motion to approve the agenda as revised is in order.
So moved.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to approve the agenda as revised. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Dumas. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. You now have before you the consent agenda. Is there any objection to the consent agenda as revised? Any objection to the consent agenda? Any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda as revised has been approved. You now have before you an item potentially for executive session. A motion to go into closed session to determine whether there is a need for executive session would be in order.
Move approval.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to go into a closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Carver. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure passes. I'll now ask everybody to clear the room so that the board can go into a closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session.
A few things on there, for some reason I had that printed. Carl, how are you? Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Congratulations.
All right, the board approved one motion in executive session, and that motion was the approval of a resolution authorizing the mayor of the city of Starkville, Board of Aldermen to make amendments to the Community Development Block Grant, subgrant number R-103-347-01-KED, as required by the Mississippi Development Authority, and corresponding documents to that resolution, which included a memorandum of agreement, a request for proposals, and a form a notice of public hearings. That was the loan motion approved in executive session, and we will now continue with the agenda. And the next matter on the agenda is announcements and comments by the mayor and members of the board. I have no comments this evening. Are there any comments by the members of the board? Any comments from the members of the board? Any comments? Seeing none, we'll now move into citizen comments. At this time, any citizen wishing to make comments may do so by coming forward, introducing yourself, and you will be recognized to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Oh, I got 2 coming at once. Y'all just kind of decide amongst yourself how you'd like to do this. But one of you has to come.
Good evening to the mayor and board. My name is Alderman, Town of Ward 7. I just like to say that on the 10th of this month, I had a hit and run, and I would just like to continue to, y'all pray for me because I get kind of jittery. It's been 9 years since that. I get kind of jittery, but anyway, other than that, continue to pray for me. The citizens have one concern, and that is the traffic light right there at Louisville, Yates, Scales, and Gillespie are in need of turning signal. Yeah, because the school get backed up pretty tough during school time, and they be running pretty fast. So if you could turn a signal in there to try to kind of keep the buses slowed down and keep the people from running over each other. All right, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I recognize?
You may.
I'm definitely clear. Mr. Turner, you mentioned a lot of streets. Were you talking about Gillespie and Lewis right there, the Langley store?
Yeah.
That's the light. I just want to clarify for the record. So what you're talking about, for clarity, he's talking about the light there at the intersection of Gillespie and Lewis at the old Langley store near the railroad track.
Right.
I got you. I just want to clarify it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turner.
And Mayor,
Alderman Sistrunk?
are you making a note of that, Mr. Kemp, and you'll check into it? Thank you very much.
Further citizen comments?
Mr. Mayor and Board of Aldermen, I'm Patrick Nordine, and this is my mother-in-law, Mrs. Sandra Poe, and we are here to request an extension for the property at 410 Jackson Street. I'd like a 1-year extension, and the reason that I would like an extension on that property is because my wife and I are currently exploring and doing we're looking into doing a complete rehab of that house. I was on the phone this afternoon with Todd Sanders with the Mississippi Department of Archives and History, spoke to him for a good half an hour about that property. I've been on the phone with Joe Ellen Hensley with National Park Service about the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Historic Preservation. It's our intention to bring that house not just up to code, but back to its glory. That's one of the oldest houses in Starkville, and we would like an extension to be able to do the work that we need to do on the front end to make it right. So we've actually taken some action steps already to come into compliance with the code. Today, the front porch came down. That's only a temporary thing because we've got all the measurements, the proportions, and everything to put it right back up in the way that it was when the rehab is done. So I'm asking for at least a 6-month extension, ideally a 1-year extension on that property, please.
Thank you, Mr. Nordine.
Mayor, is this something we're gonna discuss at this time, or we're gonna discuss it when we get to that?
No, it's on the agenda at a later time. If you have any questions or comments for Mr. Nordine or Ms. Poe, you can certainly ask them now, or if they are still here at the time of that discussion. Okay.
I did go by there today and see that work was started, so good to see.
Thank you. Do we have any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments this evening?
Since nobody else is getting up, I guess I'm gonna have to get up. To the board and to everybody that's up at the desk, I would just like to say, is what, 10 of y'all, you got an audience out here that you done lost because they left when y'all decided to go into section like that. We come up here for a meeting. When we come for a meeting, please think about the citizens and what you're doing. Most of us have other meetings that we would like to attend also after we leave, here. We can't stay here all night. But please consider, next time for your agenda, consider when a lot of people have gotten through and have to go to choir practice in different places like that. I would just like you to know, y'all sitting down, we're right there standing up. Y'all had 10 chairs, we probably could have took over to the next room. But please don't make the citizens have to do this anymore. I'm begging. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Isaac. Do we have any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Any further citizen comments? Seeing none, we'll move to public appearances. And we have 3 public appearances tonight. Each of you will have a maximum of 10 minutes to make your public appearance, and I would ask that you remain seated for any questions or comments by the members of the board at the conclusion of your public appearance. The first appearance is by Ms. Kay Mercado and the studio school students to report on the project.
Good evening, Mayor and Alderman. We are happy to be here, first of all, to thank you for your support of Studio School. A little bit of history on Studio School. The project started 5 years ago as a concept for dropout prevention, and we have worked diligently with 4 communities to bring them together. And tonight, we have brought one of our Starkville students to report on our work this summer, which you all supported. So I'm going to try to back up in our slideshow here. And turn the microphone over to my studio school student.
Taught him something.
He is much more technology savvy than I.
We noticed.
You did notice. I was trying to keep that under.
Good afternoon, y'all. My name is Jonathan Williams. I am a freshman at Starkville High, and I'm here to present what we did at Studio School over the summer.
Some nice pants you got on there.
I knew that picture would come in handy.
Most of the staff are Megan Holmes, Kay Mercado, Jason Walker, Nate Thomas, which is not here, and DeVita Beckham, who is not here.
Jason and I and Megan are faculty at MSU. Nate is a student at MSU, and DeVita Beckham is a Columbus School District teacher.
During the first day of the actual day count was on June the 4th, and we got to know each other, got to get along with each other, and throughout the few weeks we got a close bond, close relationship with each other. And at the overnight count, just had
What's your favorite thing? Sanderson Center?
Yeah, the Sanderson, the activities we did over at the Sanderson Center.
In fall tutoring?
And the follow-up tutoring, my tutor, her name was Daisy, and she really helped me out with my schoolwork and helped me to do better in school.
We've had several group presentations, and as you know, with Studio School, it's a pedagogy that teaches students to try things, make mistakes, and then try them again and do them better the next time. Jonathan's the first solo flight presentation, and he's never been to a city council meeting, so this was a great opportunity for him. And our next presentation will be at the Starkville School Board, because they also supported our work. You don't have to do it. I use an Apple. Is this me? Okay. Your investment afforded us a lot of things in our camp. We learned to design in Studio School. We learned math and science content that's required by the Mississippi Curriculum Frameworks. We took field trips to really unique places that kids could walk to. A lot of our study was about walkability in Starkville, and I know that's been an agenda item for you all for quite some time. And so our students learned how to commute by foot and get that daily physical activity. They used something called an activity monitor that Jonathan's going to talk about shortly. A lot of assessment was done. In addition to the academic assessment, we did some other assessments that were important to students and our researchers that were involved, and we'll introduce them shortly. Students used computers, as you can see. We had guest lectures, we had campus tours, we had a dorm experience, and then individual and group fitness at the MSU Sanderson Center. Let's see. Is that the first one?
And around the end of the program, we did this Choctaw symbol.
That's right.
I really can't remember what it stood for, but I had fun helping make it.
We'll have to ask Jason. Do you remember, Jason? Remember? Continual happiness throughout all stages of your life. The students did some research on that. Jason helped shape what should go there appropriately. They did some historical research of the area and came up with this symbol and put it together.
And that's the activity monitor we use throughout the physical activity at the Sanderson Center. And mostly what we did, we used it when we were walking back and forth from campus to certain places, and while we were doing like certain activities like jogging, playing basketball, and other physical activities.
Fantastic. So it might be important for our other guests to just stand and sort of explain what this is. We hope that we'll be allowed to display this poster so people can see it maybe in the next couple of days. But with Studio School, we try to bond the local schools in the areas that we've worked, which is like Tibahaw County, Noxubee County, West Point, and Starkville. They're our Studio School partnering districts. Each one of those districts has given just a tiny bit of money. Your group gave some money this year, and so we are prepared now after these service grants to work for a science grant. So that is our next stage. This is science that we do on our shoestring budget, and if you guys would stand up and introduce yourselves and talk. Megan? Yeah.
Megan Holmes, and these are my students. We just got back from a conference this last weekend in Greenville, South Carolina. It's our regional meeting for the American College of Sports Medicine. We presented this particular study looking at the physical activity levels of our campers during this camp. What was particularly interesting is that this type of learning environment, they were learning the entire time, but they were also getting close to their daily required physical activity levels, which is not common in a traditional classroom-based setting. And so it was a unique opportunity to increase physical activity, increase civic engagement and awareness, and really end up with a pretty fantastic end product. So we were pretty happy about it. And it was very well received at the meeting, too.
You don't want to stand up and say your majors? Is that what your majors are?
And you got just a few seconds.
2 seconds.
Mallory French, having a master's in clinical exercise physiology.
I'm Kirk Cooksey, and I'm getting my undergrad in clinical exercise physiology.
I'm David Schrock. I'm getting my master's in clinical exercise physiology.
All right, and that will conclude the 10-minute public presentation. Do we have any questions or comments by the members of the board?
Job well done. The sun looks great. I think the whole program's great.
I think so too. I think it's interesting how it's faded and sort of aged into that area. It looks like it's been there forever.
It is. It looks nice. It kind of
It
blend
does.
into the street.
Alderman Dumas is particularly fond of the sun. A quick story. I found out about the sun when I was on my way to Florida for a little vacation. I got a call from a reporter asking me about the special call meeting the next day, and that's where the sun was born. Thank y'all very much.
Thank you.
Are those your chicken houses down in the right corner?
That was the project from West Point
Oh,
School
okay.
District, and they made chicken coops. They were working with the International Poultry Project, and Jason is really the expert on both designs there. The design in the upper right-hand corner is like Tibahaw County students. What they made for their experience was a STEM Woman's Walk of Fame, and so they had a Girl Power STEM extravaganza at the Sportsplex. Lots of Girl Scouts came and experienced these modules that were STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So those are 3 years worth of studio school projects.
You did a good job with your presentation. Thank you.
Did you hear that?
Thank you. And our next public presentation will be made by Jamie Mott on behalf of Volunteer Starkville. And I am going to momentarily pass the gavel to Alderman Sister.
Good evening, Mayor and Board of Aldermen. My name is Jamie Mott. I'm the Director of Volunteer Starkville. So my presentation tonight will briefly touch on who we are, Volunteer Starkville, and what we do, and then about the truck day that you did not get to read about, so I will inform you of what that is. Basically, we were established as a 501c3 nonprofit organization in May of 2010 to serve as the volunteer center for the city of Starkville in Tibahaw County, Mississippi. We are one of 6 volunteer centers in the state of Mississippi that are funded by the Mississippi Commission for Volunteer Services based in Jackson, Mississippi. Our mission is to provide for the development, coordination, and organization of service activities within the city and county. And with our mission statement being very similar to that of the Maroon Volunteer Center located within the Office of Student Leadership and Community Engagement at Mississippi State University, we partner together to engage different volunteers from the Mississippi communities and the Mississippi State community and the city and county in different service opportunities and connect them with our nonprofit partners. So together we work hand in hand serving a number of nonprofit and not-for-profit organizations and helping them with their volunteer recruitment needs, as well as we co-plan and coordinate community-wide service events to engage the populations of Mississippi State University and the communities of Starkville and Tibahaw County in National Days of Service. We have 4 National Days of Service, which are Martin Luther King Jr. National Day of Service in January, National Volunteer Week in April, September 11th, National Day of Service and Remembrance in September, and Make a Difference Day in October. Just a brief look at what we were able to accomplish in 2012. Volunteer Starkville serves 62 nonprofit and not-for-profit organizations in helping them recruit volunteers. So an example of that would be like the Boys and Girls Club, the Tibahaw County Humane Society, the Starkville Central Neighborhood Foundation, that sort of thing. So 62 different organizations last year. We were able to recruit and engage 1,200 volunteers from the community and Mississippi State University to engage in service projects that we coordinated. 415 of those volunteers were actually engaged in our National Day of Service project coordinated with the Maroon Volunteer Center. And together with the Maroon Volunteer Center, we recognized 315 volunteers for their service to the communities. Overall, Volunteer Starkville, the Maroon Volunteer Center, and our nonprofit partners were able to engage 5,244 volunteers last year who served a total of 18,000 service hours within our communities. So what is Starkville's Big Truck Day? As a nonprofit organization, funding is something that I'm challenged with as the director, and we have not in the past done any major fundraisers. So this is my first shot at a fundraiser for our organization. The idea was trying to find a family-friendly event that would be a good educational and I guess a fun event for the community, but then also serve as a fundraiser for my organization. If you've ever heard of a Big Truck Day, I'm not talking about like a monster truck show or anything like that, but a Big Truck Day is basically when you get a bunch of city and safety vehicles, kind of set them out on display, and we can charge admission. We can get basically a all-access pass that someone would purchase, and it gives children and others of us that are kind of kids, big kids, I guess you would say, like myself, a chance to really interact and touch these different vehicles. I mean, little kids are fascinated by big fire trucks, ambulances, police cars. I mean, even the garbage truck. If you think of back when you were a little kid, these big trucks that you saw on TV, you saw in different places, you might have even seen them on the street, but you never actually got to get inside and look at them. All these vehicles will actually be turned off, and they'll be guarded. So like a fire truck would be guarded by the fireman or the firefighter, and kids will actually get to climb in and explore their favorite vehicles and talk to the different people about how the vehicles are used. So this event, it's been approved by the Parks Commission because I'm wanting to host it at the Starkville Sportsplex in their old parking lot, and it's been tentatively scheduled for April 6th, which is a Saturday, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And Volunteer Starkville, we have a limit of liability insurance policy that gives us $1 million liability for our different events. So we meet the city's requirement for an event, and we've gotten approval from the Parks Commission. So my request for the city of Starkville, and I'm going to be making the same request to the county tomorrow, is to provide us in-kind use of city vehicles and staff members for us to be able to put on this event.
Is the mayor gonna take his car?
I don't know if it qualifies as a big vehicle.
It's pretty
Well,
big.
I'm asking the Mississippi State to bring their little car that Bully rides in, so you could definitely.
I don't know if I'm as much fun as Bully.
I don't know. We could have a contest.
Was that the conclusion of your
that's
presentation?
all.
Do we
Yes.
have
So
any
were there any
questions or
questions?
comments from the members of the
I've
board?
got a question for you. One thing that this board has tried, we brought into discussion several times is litter control and things like that. Have y'all ever done any kind of litter control, or do you see a need for people maybe needing hours that would want to help and coordinate some kind of?
I could definitely coordinate a cleanup project with the Starkville Sportsplex for that.
Can I give you my number and then we can talk? Maybe we've discussed
Yes.
that.
Yes, you
recently
can.
before then.
I'm always looking for service events to connect people with, so that would be
We can
great.
give you some hours.
Yeah.
Any further questions or comments from the members of the board?
Jamie, I appreciate your presentation. It's a great event, great organization, and this was approved on consent agenda, so.
And you got some money tonight.
Yeah, and you got $500.
Yeah. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Mott. Our final public presentation this evening is by Ms. Sabrina Campbell to discuss city officials.
If I may, could you each take one of these and pass it down to me, please? Okay, I didn't come fancy today with computer technology. I'll be pretty simple, straight to the point and basic. I came up previously about the misconduct of police officers on our property when they stopped my husband in the driveway to check his license. No problem with that. The problem was with their conduct once they were on our property and the way that we were treated by them. I was given you went into executive session, agreed to take this matter up yourself because I did not trust the chain of command. That was done. I went back and I reviewed the records that were done, all the paperwork. Mayor, I'd like to ask you, have you reviewed any of those records in that file?
I have not gone through that file in any great detail.
May I ask why?
because if you will recall at that meeting, the board delegated the matter to Ms. Spruill, and subsequently delegated Alderman Perkins as the liaison from the board on the matter.
Okay, so Ms.
Normally, I would have been much more involved in the review of the file.
Okay, well, I am gonna personally request that you do view that file for the simple fact of what's contained in that file. Because I've read that file extensively and taken extensive note on that file. And if you recall, I came up and spoke about the fact that no one contacted me about anything until the day, Thursday before the meeting, and that seemed to have been taken on a personal matter. It seemed to have become a personal thing with me and Ms. Spruill, and it should not have.
Yes, ma'am.
But there's a report in there by Ms. Spruill that is somewhat vindictive, and I did not like that. It was made out to be personal. Poorly written, by the way, but if you quote someone, please, and it's a written statement that you're quoting, please quote me accurately. Do not misquote me, do not demean the things that I've said in the report. Now, my biggest issue with that is I came up here because I felt that what they did was wrong and justice should have been served. But when I read this report, Mayor, and I beg you to take a look at this report, whatever's contained in that report should remain between the incident at hand. Would you agree?
Yep.
I'm saying, right, you agree, yes. So,
Mr. Mayor, I've got a quick question if I could.
and that would not interfere in my 10-minute time.
I'm not sure, but we're talking about a file here that none of us are privy to.
I'm gonna I'm gonna definitely give you the information.
Just a moment, please. And so could we, I mean, is this an internal matter that needs to be discussed in executive session? Because these are things, if this is a personnel matter, if this is something that's in a personnel file, then frankly, I'm not sure why that's been seen by anybody. And I think this is something that needs to work through the proper process. I don't want to inhibit anything, but if we're talking about documentation within a personnel file or some other type of file that we're not privy to, then that's a matter that we need to discuss in executive session.
Mr. Attorney, would you like to weigh in?
Well, the first step would be to make a motion to move into closed session to determine whether or not executive session would be proper.
Can we get a clarification of what type of file we're talking about?
I can clarify this for you, if I may.
Ms. Campbell, please proceed.
Okay, there's a file in which my statement, the police statements were all gathered together, okay? But in that file, what should be in that file is my statement, the police statement, and the IA statement, and that's it. That should be in that file. On your table, I just passed out some
Hold on.
information to you.
Is this a personnel file? What type of official file?
I haven't told you everything that's in there. Let me tell you what's in there, then you can definitely make that decision at that point. But
Well,
let me tell you what's in there.
Can I get some clarification from our city, either the Ms. Spruill, who's either leading this investigation, or somebody who's more inclined with what type of specific file we're talking about here?
It's the internal investigation file of the police department that was instigated at the first of the board based on the complaint that was voiced by Ms. Campbell.
And so before the board sees that and can make a determination on that, is it customary for that to be seen by anyone else involved, even though that we haven't seen it, to make a determination of?
Well, it actually not customary that I be involved in an internal investigation affair of the police, but I was directed to do so, and so I did get involved in it, and so I think we're outside of customary routine as it stands, man. So I don't know how to speak to that.
Is this the file, the IA file, or is it the file we directed you to gather?
One and the same, I believe.
Well, I mean, yeah.
See, that's my point, Mayor. That file should contain information, this is my issue, should contain information pertaining directly to that incident, as we both agree, correct? If you look on your table.
Now, Ms. Campbell, I'm not agreeing with you because.
Well, I just asked you earlier, you agree that what should be in that file should be
And I didn't
information
get a
about,
chance, I
about
didn't
this
get,
case.
I didn't get a chance to
Yeah.
answer before you proceeded.
Mr. Mayor, I move we go into closed session to determine the need of executive session.
All right, Alderman Dumas has made a motion to go into a closed session to determine whether there is a need for an executive session. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Corey. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion, any discussion, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. At this point, we'll ask everybody to clear the room, with the exception of Ms. Campbell, so that we can go into a closed session to determine whether there's a need for an executive session.
I need to catch them, you might.
The board took no action in executive session. At this time, without objection, I'm going to move us into a brief recess. You know, hear any objection? Any objection? Any objection? Saying none. Stand in recess. Sounds good. Meeting will now come back to order.
Mr. Mayor, I've got one item. Seems like the remainder of the public that's here is here for, the, code enforcement item A. And if anybody does not object, I'd like to go ahead and move that item up on the agenda to now, so we can hear that, and then those items, or those in the public who would like to leave can do so, because I guess that's, I know Patrick's here for that, so, if anybody doesn't object, I'd like to move that we reorder the agenda for 11B1A to, be moved, no, I'm not.
Move to above board business.
Just before, no, I'm saying right now, so put it up, move it up above the public hearing. Yeah.
All right, without objection, the agenda will be reordered for the item that was formerly 11B1A, request for finding of fact that 8 dilapidated properties were listed as a nuisance and are a menace to public health. Will be moved and now become, will now be the new Roman numeral A, 8 rather. Any objection? Any objection? Seeing none, we'll move into discussion on that matter. Discussion. Alderman Davis.
Lynn, could you perhaps clarify, I'm sorry, what in fact happens when these delinquent properties do not do what they are supposed to do moving forward?
Well, we have 8 properties that were in your packet. 410 South Jackson, 611 Vine, 810 South Jackson, 305 Louisville, 205 Ware, Long Street, southeastern corner of North Jackson and Kreitz, which is actually 2 parcels, and then 729 Whitfield Street. These have been in process for quite some time. Chris did his title search back in February of 2012. And we have now gotten through the process of looking at them. Some of them have been completed, some of them are in process. We have, I think Mr. Nordine is here to ask for an extension, which he stated. We have another, I believe, a requested extension for Louisville Street. And I have received an extension request for the parcel 154, I believe it is, at North Jackson and Kreitz for 30 days because they're in the process of tearing it down. So, those are the only 3 from whom we have heard, and I say that because I haven't heard from Mr. Harris, but I believe he's about to speak on that. So what we would ask you to do is, if you would like to grant the extension that's been requested of those 3, and then continue with the other dilapidated structures, to go ahead and declare them to be dilapidated and allow us to, as we are able, this is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. When you make that declaration as dilapidated structures, we will put them on a schedule to go out, and we'll certainly notify the folks and give them time to perhaps do more, but this gives us the authority to go ahead and take care of those properties as we are able, and we use, as you know, we use staff where we have some landscape staff and we have some free staff, I say free there, we can find some extra time for them to do that, like landscape people who are not necessarily out mowing right now. So we use those staff people to do an in-house job on tearing down these properties. Yes, sir.
Just got a couple questions. As far as there's no demolition or anything like that, it's just more of a landscaping.
Well, no, some of them are actually there. If you look in your file, you'll see the pictures. We have taken pictures of all the properties.
Right.
Some of them, it's related mostly to trash and weeds and that sort of thing, but there are houses that are unsound and unsafe, and those are the ones that we would take down. And that's in part what we've got here, that these folks have been out working to make the areas that were unsafe, taking the porch down and that sort of thing, so that it's not, in danger of falling down and being uninhabitable and dangerous to human.
Anything that happens in that process, like as far as landscaping hours and things, is it billed back to the homeowner, property owner? Or is it an in-kind service? Or?
Well, no, we would document the value of that service, and then we put a lien on the property. That was part of Chris's title search, and that's part of what that statute allows.
And the third representative, you said there were 3 extension requests tonight. That's one of Mr. Nordine. Is the third person here?
No, they're not. They came to me this afternoon and said they couldn't be here, but would like a 30-day extension. And since it was a fairly minimal extension, I told them I would make that presentation to the board. Didn't know what the board would do, but I would make that presentation on their behalf, so.
Which property was that?
That's what I was gonna look at. It's the one on Crates in, North Jackson, and I was trying to see.
The old store?
Yes, it's the old store, and that, it's an odd deal, cause the old store is one building, but it's owned by two people. So it's kind of, it's been difficult to get a hold of one person to get something done, and the other person is, you know, unavailable, or we can't get them both at the same time to do this. And it is, parcel number 155 of those parcel numbers that are in your packet.
Alderman Vaughn.
Yes, sir.
Ms. Brewer,
Yes, sir.
332 Long Street been completed, just gotta be moved away. And 205 Washington Street.
Where or Washington? Where?
Where? 205 West
Yes.
Street. I think they're gonna start on that one on next week.
Yes, sir. And that's what we're still in the mode of giving these people an opportunity to do what needs to be done. But this allows us, if it drags out, for us to go ahead and go in and take care of it.
And I move that 410 South Jackson, that we grant that property only 1 year to make that property a historical site.
All right, Alderman Vaughn has made a motion to grant a 1-year extension. Hold on one second, what was the address?
410 South Jackson.
410 South Jackson.
To the property at 410 South Jackson Street, from being declared as a nuisance and a menace to public health. Alderman Vaughn, is that your motion?
Yes, it is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Carver. Alderman Vaughn, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Alderman Sistrunk.
If I may, Alderman Vaughn, could I, given that we have elections coming up and there'll be at least some changeover in the board, can I make that contingent upon them providing quarterly reports to the chief administrative officer to be sure we're tracking?
Yeah, you can amend that to that, yeah.
Code enforcement, to code
Right.
enforcement, to be sure we're tracking.
Alderman Vaughn has accepted Alderman Sistrunk's amendment as friendly to make the motion contingent upon quarterly reports to the Code Enforcement Office on progress with the property.
Oh, okay. Are we going to wait until we hear from the other gentleman in the audience to do something with his property?
Yeah, right now we have a motion pending just related to this one parcel. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Mr. Harris, would you like to address the board regarding your property?
I would. I guess I should apologize to the Mayor and Board of Aldermen and the City of Starkville for letting some property get in disarray as I have. But I bought that property in '72, I believe it was. I've raised 5 children out of there. When they got up pretty well grown, I had to make a decision. Do I spend money on education, or do I keep spending money on the house? I had renovated the house totally at one time. And 4 of my kids graduated college. None of them had a debt when they graduated. I think we should all talk to our kids about getting a degree, but when they graduated, it's terrible. When they come out, they want $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. That's where my money went. I have one that has a master's degree, it teaches. I have another that's an attorney in Tupelo. She works real close to Jim Wade. That may be good or bad.
I know her. She does a good work.
Okay. My daughter's McLaughlin.
I know.
Okay.
Married to Shane, right?
Yeah. Got a grandson. But when you spend the money on children like that, sometimes you neglect other things that should be done, and I did. And I have another place that we moved into over on old West Point Road, Happy. What I would really like to do, that house was built in 1890. It was a Crowell house. Everybody in this town that's of any age, which none of you are, have probably
Thank
spent
you.
some time there. And I am now in the construction business. I do a lot of ceramic tile, hardwood floors, and remodeling. I did 5 years of community counseling. I've redone Dr. Ben Sanford's house, Dr. John and Jean Marzelek's house. I could go through this and read the name of everybody I've worked for.
Which addresses?
Huh?
Using on Louisville? Okay.
Yes.
Louisville Street.
It's on Louisville Street. The front part of the house still looks pretty good. The addition that was done on the back does not have materials in it that was used on the front part of the house, and it became decayed, had a bad roof on it, it was rotted and fallen in. Now, what I propose to do, if given time, I will take that back off, I will put the wall back on the original structure, it will come out with a 2-bedroom, a living room, a kitchen, and a bath. And since I'm in construction business, I think that within 6 months to a year, wouldn't have any problem to bring it back up to code. It needs to be rewired, and some of the floors need to be replaced. But I would give Jeff a monthly report on it, if that's permissible. I will put a new roof on that house within the next 3 weeks. Depending, no matter what the weather does, I'll get it on there. And I would like to have some time to bring it back up, but my family, especially my wife, would kind of like to just have it tore down. But we're gonna have to reach that decision the next couple of days. I've had some guys down there cleaning a lot off. There's a couple of cars, I had a 1968 AMX, a 1978, I think I might have been a little French car, sitting there, and I had a Pontiac Fiero. The way you clean that up is you just give them away. I can tell you that 68 AMX in today's world is not a cheap vehicle to give away. But that's done. They've been cleaning the property up. We went out there and trimmed all the hedges, all the rushes being took down. They've tore down a little storage shed out to the side, which wasn't mine. It was being used by the Joneses on the house next door with rental folks. Every time those college students move out, they carry all the trash over there and throw it in that little store, in that big storage unit. That has been tore down. So in the process of cleaning all that up, I will get that off in the back, and then my wife will make a decision. As usual, guys, whether we completely tear it down or I go ahead and renovate. Now, if it's to be tore down, I have the ability, the manpower, and et cetera, to do it. I'd like to do it myself, because there will be some tears shed as it's done. But I would just, I would beg the city officials to give me, I've had plenty of time. I did other things. I'm like the carpenter. I fixed everybody else's shoes, and my family went barefooted. But I will and can take care of that, and we'll report to Jeff. Now, if we tear it down, it'll all be tore down, cleaned up, hauled off, and I'll plant flowers on it.
Mr. Harris, I appreciate your honesty. I move that we also grant Mr. Harris the same provisions we gave Mr. Dorney for his property.
All right, Alderman Dumas has made a motion that the property located at 305 Louisville Street will be granted a 1-year extension from being declared a nuisance and a menace to public health, with Mr. Harris making quarterly reports to the Code Enforcement Office on his progress for getting the property up to code. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
I do not.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Alderman Carver.
Being interested in both of these pieces of property, would that be something we'll be updated to, or is that just standard as to go straight to the code?
That would be an internal report. Mr. Lyles will keep a file on it, so you would be able to review the file.
I can personally bring you a report if you'd like to have one, and you're welcome to come by and just view the process.
I drive by there often. Both the houses, I mean, mentioned both, and I know both of them are landmark houses.
Well,
for the
Starkville's
city.
not real big, there's not too many places you can go in this town without driving by something that's nice, or something that's a little run down.
Look forward to it.
Okay. My opinion, y'all have done a good job, overall, not just tonight. I watch you all the time on TV. And I really appreciate you, and I appreciate what you've done for me tonight.
Thank you.
Okay?
Any further discussion? Any
Mayor,
further discussion?
Oh, we're gonna vote on it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Alderman Davis, you have
I
another
move
motion.
approval that the other six,
Lynn had one more that had.
Lynn had a request for a 30-day extension. Was that to do the demo, or was that to get the property up to code?
But if we give you authorization tonight along with the other 5, then you don't necessarily, wouldn't demolish it tomorrow. I mean, you would.
No, that's what I'm saying,
You would
but
still have that 30, so
thank you.
I'd say we go ahead and.
There is some desire not to be declared as a menace to human.
Well.
Well, I mean,
You've granted a year extension to others. This is a request for 30 days, so.
Let's give it a
It's up
Mr.
to
Mayor,
you.
I move that we request finding of fact that 6 dilapidated properties as listed are a nuisance and a menace to public health, excluding the previously approved Jackson and Louisville Street properties.
Alderman Dumas has made a motion that 6 properties as presented, excluding the Jackson Street property and the Louisville Street property, are listed as nuisance and public, a menace to public health properties. Alderman Dumas, that's your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
May I, oh, sorry.
Do I hear a second?
Second with a friendly amendment.
All right, motion has been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Dumas, do you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Alderman Sistrunk.
May we change that to 5 properties and grant the property at Kreitz and North Jackson a 30-day extension to complete their demolition? Oh, come on.
I was giving credit to folks that at least came up here and talked to us.
Well, they contacted Lynn.
Yes.
All right, Alderman Dumas is accepted as friendly, affording the same extension to the property of
30 days.
30 days.
affording a 30-day extension to the property at Kreitz and, was it North Montgomery?
Yeah.
North Jackson.
And North Jackson.
North Jackson.
Alderman Dumas has accepted that as friendly, so that is now part of the motion. Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes.
Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of rescinding the order dated June 19th, 2012 regarding work for Carver Drive ditch.
Wait,
No,
public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. The second public hearing on the adoption of an ordinance, and amendment to the Code of Ordinances to regulate outside storage. Alderman Dumas.
I'm just gonna briefly, since I went over this last time, I do wanna clarify one question that was asked and get the city attorney to put anything in here that he would like. Let me get to it. There was a question by Mr. Taylor about the property on the corner of North Montgomery, or North Jackson and 182, and whether or not a screen, if she could, if the property owner could put a screen down to hide it, and that be considered inside storage at that point. And having looked at the ordinance and the city attorney looking at this, that would not in fact be the case, because if you look at outdoor furnishings, which is section C, and then you look at number 2, there is a, it clearly says that the interior of an enclosed porch, including but not limited to a porch enclosed by screening material, shall not be considered an outside area for the purpose of this section. So considering that that's covered, it would be a porch. Of course, screening material that would be temporarily put in place would not allow that outside storage to then go to that point. Chris, do you want to add anything to that?
I do not.
Okay. What I've done in this is, because there were questions on that, I wanted to forego voting on it tonight, so we will have a third public hearing at the next board meeting. So if you have any questions tonight, would be a time to, I'll definitely welcome any comments or questions tonight before we move forward, and knowing that we won't be voting on this tonight.
Questions or comments from the members of the board? Any questions? Alderman Corey.
So I make sure I understand this correctly, and you have to forgive me because I wasn't present at the previous meeting for the first public hearing, but couches on the porch, if it's not completely screened in, would therefore be found in violation of this?
You should have seen my presentation. All right, a couple of things here, and I apologize, I forgot you weren't here. There's a couple of things that it looks at. One is outside storage, and outside storage would be where you have an entire stock that you place outside and you store it outside. And that's of only outside intended things. So yard furniture, deck, patio furniture, lawnmowers, those kind of things. That has to be screened. That's covered in Section A. Section B then talks about outside display. So that is I'll use Western Auto for an example, or Lowe's or Kroger, where they have outside displays. Displays are only a sampling of their stock. They don't have a full stock. Those are allowed as well, as mentioned in Section D. Section C covers the couches and furnishings type thing, and it talks about on down in the ordinance that if it's a porch or something along those lines, you can have, let me see what its exact language is. Placement of, like number 3, placement of furnishing or furniture not specifically manufactured for outdoor use on balconies or porches located on the second floor or any floor above the second floor is not precluded by the provisions of this section. The big part that this covers is that on commercial applications, you can't have interior furnishings stored outside overnight. So mattresses, couches, lazy boys, recliners, those kind of things. They can't be permanently stored outside in the front yard without a proper screen. Now, it does talk about on the side yard or others, but those, you still can't do interior furnishings outside because of the public health issue associated with mold, mildew, other type things. I did say that couches in the Cotton District would still be, you know, those are comfortably placed, but I hope that answered your question.
Sure. I remember a very interesting presentation by a student over that issue. Alderman Perkins, you probably remember that was in my previous term, but it was very enlightening.
I didn't sit at this table and even knew that there were issues surrounding couches in the Cotton District.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, I'm done.
Yes, sir.
Alderman
Carver.
The lawnmower question, can you have the row of lawnmowers out for display?
You can.
As long as, can they permanently stay outside?
Yeah, they can. Anything that's anything that's an exterior device, you can display those outside as long as you want to.
It's just not indoor furniture left outside?
Correct. Overnight, those type of things. Longer than a 12-hour period.
And this doesn't reference to any yard sales or anything like that?
No, the previous one did last year, but there were so many moving parts in that I think that needs to be handled separately.
And the fine, we haven't determined yet?
I figured someone was going to ask about the fines. Yes, there is something in
There's a
here.
provision that says the fines will be determined by the Board of Aldermen.
Yep. Well, we have to set that before we vote on them?
Alderman Dumas, the garage sales are mentioned now, 5C.
Well, there was an entire section, I'm sorry, there was an
Right.
entire section about yard sales that was in here before. And yes, there's a short section in here, but that big section covering yard sales where we talked about you couldn't have more than this many a year, those types of things. Yeah, this basically says that in the event that you have furniture outside, it's allowable during these hours, those types of things. But this ordinance is not meant by any way to direct and regulate yard sales in the way it was intended at the beginning.
City Attorney, how do you feel about voting on this if we don't, I mean, the only heartburn I got left with it would be voting on something for a fine and then not knowing what the fine is on the day we vote at the next public hearing, so do we need to set that fine structure, fee structure before we vote on it?
Well, a couple things, not voting on it tonight.
Right.
And when you do vote, if you ever did vote on the fine, you would have a say as to what that fine was. And so I don't think there's a legal impediment to the board leaving that fine undetermined. I also don't think you're prohibited from going ahead and naming a fine if you wanted to. So whatever y'all want to do on that issue.
Further discussion from the board. Any further discussion from the board? Seeing none, we'll now hear public comments on the subject, and we will keep with standard practice on public comments for ordinances or ordinance revisions. We'll hear in alternating fashion from those wishing to speak for and against, and for a maximum of 3 minutes. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the proposed ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak against the proposed ordinance? Anyone wishing to speak for, against, or indifferent to the proposed ordinance? Seeing no one, we'll move back into final comments by the members of the board. Are there any concluding comments by the members of the board on this matter? Any concluding comments?
Just briefly, Lynn, if you could you send me something on, I'm not familiar with how we've handled fines before. I don't know if we've covered that in this term, so can you send me something on that?
Yes, and normally we do it by resolution, so if we want to change the fine or fee schedule or whatever, permit requirement, whatever, we don't impact the ordinance.
Okay.
So that's what we need as an agenda.
And I'll have that for distribution before the next public hearing. Yeah, yeah.
Are there any further concluding comments? Seeing none, that will conclude the second public hearing on the outside storage ordinance. You now have before you the consideration of rescinding the order dated June 19th, 2012 regarding Carver Drive ditch. Alderman Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to offer the following as a motion. It's been reduced to writing. The city attorney has approved it here. I move approval of rescinding the previous board order relating to the piping and covering of the remainder of Carver Drive ditch, instead concreting the entire size and bottom of Carver Drive ditch through work by city employees and/or contractors, and with $175,000 in city funds. This work to commence upon approval of the project by the Mississippi Emergency Management Agency and/or Federal Emergency Management Agency following the city submission of notice and a letter of map revision as required. As part of this motion, the city attorney is authorized to submit any and all documents to MEMA or FEMA necessary for their review and approval of the work, and to follow with city staff and/or MEMA or FEMA as needed in an attempt to expedite review of this project.
All right, Alderman Perkins has made a motion. He's reduced it to writing, and that motion has been placed with the clerk. As he has read the motion, I will not restate the motion at this time. Alderman Perkins, would you like, or excuse me, do I hear a second on Alderman Perkins' motion?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Perkins, would you like to speak on the merits?
No, sir.
Discussion. Any discussion?
I've got
Alderman Carver.
Just to recap from my memory, the June 19th motion was that, it was in the sum of like $154,000.
Same amount.
Same amount?
Same
So
amount.
this would just be
Changing the method.
This is more extensive work, so I mean, we're not gonna increase the amount by any. The previous was for riprap, right?
It was for grass matting.
Grass matting, and now we're gonna concrete for the same price.
There's not been a request for any
Not the
additional.
entire channel, just sections.
Can we get it done for the same price? I mean, obviously, there's gotta be some kind of difference in price between grass matting and concrete. Has that been researched and we know that we can get this done for the same amount?
Alderman Perkins, would you like to speak to the nature of the motion?
Mr. Mayor, basically, we're just going to use $175,000 to do this scope of work, and that's all the money we have. So we're just going to do whatever that money allows us to do in terms of concrete the bottom side. That's it.
So the motion would be to use the $175,000 to make as much progress as possible concreting the ditch.
So probably less distance will be covered for this amount versus what we could do for grass matting?
I don't know.
Without getting a full report on cost estimates for the city engineer, I think it's premature to reach that conclusion.
Is that what you think, city engineer?
I haven't really done any cost estimating on the concrete.
So who came up with this figure?
Mr. Mayor, may be recognized.
Hold on, let Alderman Carver finish.
I'm just wanting to know where this figure was.
I believe the 175 was for the original approved method, which was the grass matting.
Yeah, I know, and I'm just saying, if for the same price.
We put a cost estimate for that, if that's what you're asking, to do that full length project using that.
My fear is just if you're gonna keep the price the same, that there's gonna be a lot less work, a lot less distance covered, I guess, for what you could do grass matting versus concrete. So, I mean, you're actually getting less. Just the same distance gonna be covered?
I don't have any idea how far the concrete will go without doing some estimating. Sorry, I don't have that number.
It's all right.
Alderman Perkins.
I have nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of Alderman Perkins' motion, please signify by raising your hand. All those opposed, please signify by raising your hand. By a vote of 6 in favor with 1 against, this measure passes.
Mr. Mayor, may I just briefly say, I want, on behalf of the residents of Carver Drive, I want to just personally thank each one of you who voted in the affirmative for this. Without your vote and support, that this matter would not have happened. And I want to thank each one of you for your leadership on this project, and that the residents of Carver Drive will be forever grateful and appreciative for the vote. And we are just very humble and just genuinely appreciative for your affirmative vote. And I'll be sure to let my constituents and other people in the community know about the leadership of those who voted in the affirmative for this particular motion. Thank you.
The next matter on the agenda is discussion and consideration of the capital improvement projects for 2013.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to thank the board for the opportunity to come before you tonight to give my recommendations for 2013 capital improvement budget, as well as look ahead for the next couple of years. Also, just in prefacing, want to say thanks to each one of you for the time that you gave in riding around and looking at each ward. I really enjoyed that. Enjoy always getting to get your perspective on the ward and see what the issues are and hear your concerns. So I will try to keep this brief. I know it's already been a long night tonight, but feel free to stop me at any point if you have any questions or need any more information, and certainly be an opportunity at the end. That's what I'd like to go through relatively quickly. So let's start a little bit with funding for this year. This board is probably going to be aware of the funding as part of this year's capital improvement funds, basically coming from two different sources. One being the funds that you budgeted as part of the fiscal year 13 municipal budget. We put money toward street improvements, ADA, and drainage. And then we recently did a budget amendment to add $225,000 to that number. So we have a total of $705 this year. And I know you're thinking, wow, that's a lot of money that we can spend this summer. Well, in actuality, we've already spent some of it. If you recall, we did about $400,000 this past fall for the 2012 fall overlays. We did 3 streets. And then we've also obligated $20,000 to go to the Highway 182 riprap project. So this is the funds remaining for us to do additional projects this summer. So keep that in mind. We have $285,000 more to spend. But all in all, at the end of this fiscal year, we'll have spent $705,000, which is a great number, and I applaud the board for their commitment to the infrastructure for this year. Look ahead to next year, and actually 2015 as well would be the next slide. Just want to tell you kind of how we developed this. This is conceptual. Obviously, we're still a little ways out, but consulted with the finance director on kind of just general ballpark numbers of what we potentially could expect from infrastructure dollars, and came up with around $500,000 for fiscal year 14 and $550,000 you'll see for 15. Obviously, these numbers are not set in stone. This board will have to budget those funds. It can go up or down depending on what the municipal budget, but we had to provide at least a starting point, a realistic starting point, and try to tailor a budget around this general ballpark. We, as in years past, have allocated that total fund amount toward 3 different types of projects. Roadway maintenance taking up the bulk of it, 70%, 20% going to drainage, and then 10% going to ADA and sidewalk improvements. So if you take that $500,000, you can see and apply those percentages, you can see those amounts there. Again, 2015, same process, just a little bit more money to work with. $385 for roadway overlays, $110 for drainage, and then $55 for ADA sidewalks. So before we get into actually the projects for the upcoming year, I would like to spend a moment to talk a little bit about the drainage improvement list. This list, and again, I apologize, it's very difficult to read on this screen, but it is a copy in your packet, and then for the public, it's also available on the website. This document here is kind of a living document. It's kind of evolving all the time, if you will. We've added some projects to it. We've taken some off. And we've certainly made some progress. All these projects down here that are dark shaded are projects that this board and the previous board have completed. So do want to highlight some of the successes that we made on there as well. I kept hearing from this board a kind of a desire to try to prioritize this drainage project, and I've attempted to do that in this list. Haven't prioritized the entire list, but what I call the top 11, if you will. top 11 drainage projects, and let me tell you a little bit about how I established those priorities. Basically came down to for two reasons, a combination of both or individually. First is we looked at are the projects shovel ready, and shovel ready meaning are all the easements already acquired for the projects? If we had the funding, could we start tomorrow? And if you look over on the far right, you can see the easement status that we've updated here recently, easements that are going to be required for the projects, ones that we have in hand, and then in turn which ones are outstanding. So to have a 0 at the far right column is a good thing. That means it's ready to go. So that's one factor of the prioritization. Then the other thing is what projects is there regular either street flooding going on or flooding of houses on a somewhat regular basis or a lot of erosion, that type of issues. So I've tried to combine those two parameters and come up with what I call the top 11. The ones in the top that are shaded, of course, y'all are familiar with those. Those are Carver Drive and Maple Drive, projects that we've had a lot of discussion about over the past few years. Going to continue to stay up there until they're actually completed or feel like there's some major progress being made on those. And then below that are the remainder projects. Tried to keep in mind, and you'll see this in our capital improvement plan for 2013 is, well, I'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that point. But anyway, in the middle you'll see here are what I call unprioritized drainage projects. These are projects that for the most part either don't have all the easements acquired at this time, or a lot of these at the bottom here are new drainage projects that have been added. We haven't done enough design to determine how many easements are going to be required. So I envision this list as these projects become shovel ready and funding is available, they'll jump up in the priority list. So that's kind of where we are on the drainage list. We are up to 46 projects total, and like I said, a good number of those have already been completed. So let's talk a little bit about the actual budgets for the next few years in 2013. We did already complete, let's talk a little bit about roadway. Did go ahead and complete the 2012 fall overlays, and I wanted to include those in the budget because I think a lot of times we forget about the things that we've completed and accomplished. So I did want to highlight that. A big investment, a big commitment to that. And then priority 6 roadways. I've developed a new roadway listing for the next 3+ years, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a few minutes. But around $230,000 worth of overlays this summer is my recommendation. In the drainage, of course, we've already allocated $20,000 for the Highway 182. And then the remaining 4 projects here, what I'm going to consider, well, for instance, Project 43 is the box culvert associated with the Highway 182 pipe that we've had discussions about already, in needing of some, I have a photograph showing you in a minute, but a really large crack in that box culvert, and we're hoping that we can simply do a rehabilitation of that crack, seal it, and hopefully that will solve it if it will stabilize it. If not, we may have to have some discussions about replacement, but I think this is the first step before we get into a major reconstruction. The next 3 projects are what I don't call, projects that don't cost a huge sums of money but do have a big impact. These 3 areas, the streets flood on a regular basis when there are heavy rains due to various reasons. A couple of them have inlets that are old, style, not big enough. A lot of debris collects there and winds up requiring a lot of maintenance to keep those open. Some places we have some pipes that are too small. And, some of the older parts of town, there's just insufficient storm drainage that was built when the neighborhood was installed. So that's addressing some of these issues. So about $55,000 worth of drainage this year. And then the 2 sidewalk ADA projects I'll talk a little bit about. University Drive sidewalks. This is a project that has been recommended by the Transportation Committee. and that this board has approved the first phase of that. The long-range plan is to have an accessible route from downtown to the university along University Drive, which is one of our main pedestrian corridors. And this will just be the next phase of that. It's not necessarily building new sidewalk, but is going through and removing some obstacles, curb cuts, areas where it's really severely broken and cracked, making it safer. So spending about $18,000 on that. And then the North Montgomery roadway striping is something similar that we did on Hospital Road. Alderman Perkins will recall that, as well as Crite Street, where we're basically taking a large wide roadway and adding some bike lanes and or multi-use lanes on the sides, narrowing the traffic lanes, hopefully to reduce some speeds, and providing a safe alternative for folks to walk and bike up and down that corridor. If you've ever been through there, especially in the afternoons, there is a lot of pedestrian traffic. There's a definite need for some pedestrian facilities. We've had a fatality, there a couple of years ago. And this also not only serves that need, but also provides a critical link between the investment that this board made on the Garrett Road with the multi-use path up there and the recent improvements on Crite Street. So, you know, it is kind of connecting those two separate projects. So those are our sidewalk ADA projects. Again, total of around $715,000 with our budget around $705. And I'll just mention at this point, you know, I know those numbers don't exactly line up, but we have contingencies built into some of these projects, and we are going to do our best to be wise with the funds and try to save as much as we can and manage these projects well, and hopefully that they'll underrun some. So I don't have any concerns about those numbers exactly matching up. And if you wanted them to match up exactly, what you wind up doing is doing a part of a project. You know, you do a half of an overlay, or, you know, sometimes it's hard to get those numbers to match up exactly. So you will see a little bit of discrepancy in those. How we develop the budgets for 2014 and 15, just talk a little bit about that process. And we talked a little bit about the percentages already, so I won't get into that. But a couple of things to note on that is, for the first time in several years, I'm not recommending to have a STIP allocation, and doing that for a couple of reasons. First of all, we have a new federal transportation bill, and it is only good for 2 years. So MDOT is not really distributing those federal dollars down to the municipalities like they have in the past. So I see for the next 2 years, not many federally funded transportation projects coming, because there's just a lot of uncertainty about the future holds from the federal transportation bill. And the other thing is, well, right now the only federal transportation project that we have is Lynn Lane. And in discussions with finance director and Alderman Sistrunk, we feel that if the needs arise for federal matching funds, that those can come from the contingency fund at that time as needed. So essentially taking those funds that were allocated towards STIP, because we don't really have any new projects on the board, and directing those toward the roadways, drainage, and sidewalks. And then also note in these extended budgets that some of the priorities are uncertain at this point. Like I was mentioning about the drainage, we don't know what the status of some of the drainage projects will look like in 1 year or 2 years from now. We don't know if they'll be shovel ready or not. So, and the same goes for the sidewalk projects. Need some input probably from the transportation committee. So some of these are going to be determined a little bit as we go. So here's 2014, priority 7 roadways. One of the drainage projects I'm going to recommend is the old West Point Road Bridge replacement just south of Garrett Road. It's actually going to be a shared project between the city and the county. And then the other projects will be to be determined based on the priority list and which ones are available, but we'll have about $85,000 remaining. And then you can see the sidewalk and ADA projects down there. continuing University Drive, ADA, doing some ADA ramps as part of some of the overlays that we've done, and then doing some improvements to the Spring Street Highway 12 intersection to make it more pedestrian friendly, with a lot of increased pedestrians in that area, as well as doing a similar striping on College View that we just did, that I'm just recommending on North Montgomery. And that will take it right into the university, and I believe the university is committed to extend that on into campus if we bring it to the city limits.
You mean North Nash, not North Montgomery, right?
I meant north, well, I meant North Nash to Highway 12.
Okay, yeah. You said North Montgomery and I got confused.
Well, I was saying it's a similar type project as
Oh,
North
okay.
Montgomery, which I'm recommending 2013. And then here's 2015. A lot of to be determined for the drainage and sidewalk at this point, but these are some ballpark numbers of what we'll have to work with at those times, and then priority 8 roadways. So let's talk a little bit about the roadways. These are what I'm recommending in 2013. The 3 streets up at the top we've actually already completed. So we have what is that? 8 or 9 roads left to be done this summer. I call these the worst of the worst. If you want to just get down to it, you know, these are the roads that are either in really poor shape or in a state that if we don't do something very soon, we're going to lose them. We're going to have to reconstruct them from scratch. Would like to make a note here about the, you'll see in 2013, 14, and 15, a Highland Estates subdivision. Alderman Perkins, you may know a little bit more about this history than I do, but
Yes, sir.
those roadways, from what I can gather, used to be county roads, and
Yes,
they were
sir.
just chip sealed, and then at some point the city annexed them, and shortly thereafter they overlaid them.
Yes, sir.
And when you look at them, there's really not adequate base up under those roadways. So if you ride through there, and if you hadn't been through there in a while, I would encourage you to do so. But there's just very large areas where the roadway is sloughed off, where you have a lot of sinking areas that are pushing up, just really expansive soils over there, and not adequate roadway base. So if money was no issue, we would go in and rebuild them from scratch. You know, that would be the method. But obviously, that's not reality. We don't have that much money. You're talking about probably a whole year's capital improvement project or budget to do just this neighborhood. So understanding that, you know, there are other needs in other places. I'm recommending let's set aside some funds each year and go through and do the absolute worst areas of those and just try to chip away and make these roads more traversable, because there are some areas right now where it's in really bad shape. I will say between Central Avenue and the Highland Estates roadways, in my opinion, are the worst 2 roadways in town. So our
Highland Estates is out, Old 82.
Old 82
Little subdivision to the south.
subdivision, yeah. One way in, you know, one way out. Great neighborhood, real quaint, but the roadways are really in bad shape. These are my recommendations for 2014. I will also mention that, you know, South Montgomery Street is in a state where we're going to really have to do something about it. And but again, a huge project. And so I've broken it up into 3 parts, doing a segment each year. Also in 2014, you'll see Highland Estates again, but also I'm recommending let's spend some money potentially looking at the Cushman-Lampkin intersection there. There's potentially going to be a good amount of traffic that is going to go to that intersection now, especially with the municipal building. The traffic patterns are changing, so you will see a lot of traffic going down the hill at West Main, turning on Cushman and coming up to Lampkin. As you know, that is a really awkward intersection right now. It's 5-way, and I really want to look and see if we can make that safer and more efficient, especially with the amount of increased traffic. 2015, these are the list of projects here, and again, you have that list in your packet. I don't want to set the bar too high, but there's also a lot of other needs out there, if funds do become available, or let's say asphalt prices, for example, come in much lower than expected. You know, we have other needs there, a lot of streets. We also have 2 city parking lots here downtown that are getting a lot more use now with the new parking enforcement, and they are in a pretty bad state. They're going to need some work pretty soon. So those are on there as well. These are just some photographs of some of the projects we want to take on this summer. The box culvert, there's a photograph. We actually have done an investigation of it. That's the worst area. You can see, you know, a 3-inch or 4-inch difference between those 2 concrete slabs. Highland States roadway, that's just a photograph. It's kind of hard to see. Probably doesn't do it justice. And then on the bottom, that's a photograph from the April 2010 floods that we had. I guess you call it a flash flood. But the 2 inlets there on Long Street got clogged up with leaves, and you can see what happened. This is a main route for our emergency services vehicle, especially the hospital getting ambulance service, and unable to get through it. So I think with a pretty relatively simple fix, doing some modifications to the inlet, we can prevent things like this from happening again. So in conclusion, I want to talk a little bit about just kind of where we're going here and some of the challenges we're faced with. The first one obviously being the asphalt prices. You can see that they've almost doubled over the last 10 years. Nothing we can really do about it. We can't make our own asphalt. Can't go pump our own crude oil or anything like that. So it's just something we're going to have to deal with. And I think that my recommendation on it is basically to try to extend the pavement life as long as we can, using better maintenance techniques, trying to use more of our internal staff to do some of the base repairs in advance of the contract employees to save some costs there. And then maybe look at a long-range policy to try to minimize and reduce the pavement loads that a lot of our, especially residential type streets, experience on a daily, weekly basis. I think that if we were able to reduce some of those pavement loads, you would see an extension of the pavement life pretty significantly. I think it would be a good investment.
Are you talking about the daily payment load within the carpet truck? What else would be daily?
Well, just in general, you know, maybe looking at all the types of, you know, like the street department dump trucks, for example. You know, do we really need them to be a certain size? You know, can it be smaller and maybe make an extra load, but in the same time we would reduce the pavement load. So it's kind of one of those, you have to do kind of a cost benefit analysis. Is it better to do more trips, which maybe take a little longer, but in the long run potentially could save you money because you're not having to overlay but once every 15 years instead of once every 10 years. So somewhat hard to quantify, but I think that there's some real savings to be had there.
It's worth looking at.
Yeah. And that's all I have. I will be happy to answer any questions. And
I'm gonna just, if I may, just say that I commend you on stretching those dollars as much as you can. This board's made a commitment each time we had some available funds that we budgeted conservatively, and as we had some available funds, we tried to increase this capital spending. The work that you've done with the in-house with doing the base repairs and then doing the overlays has really helped stretch dollars, and I applaud y'all for being creative in how you solve some of these problems.
Thank you. Well, of course, we have the expertise and the equipment to do that. You know, we do it a lot because we do a lot of water repair leaks and base failures. So it's just a matter of devoting a crew on a, you know, extended period of time, which is going to pull them away from doing other things. So in a sense, you're going to extend your response time of your work orders. But like you said, I think it helps us to stretch our dollars a little further.
Edward, go back to where you had your priority 9.
Priority 9.
Yeah, I'm gonna just make a plea for, yeah, there you go. 3 projects that I know are longer term than I am on this board, so I'm gonna make a plea. The three on the bottom there, I don't want those, Edward mentioned those, both of them are parking lots for downtown that do need drastic renovations. And so don't let those get lost. And then the third is Cedar Lane. This is a project in my ward that I have been chastised multiple times over because of issues. And Edward has helped me repeatedly with the couple of individuals that have asked about it. And Cedar Lane is a small little road that comes off of Hillside over from Old West Point Road area. But Cedar originally was a little bitty road that went around and then dead ended into some woods basically, and it was one little lane that went back. And now a developer has come in and extended Cedar Lane down to Old West Point Road and built a curb and gutter section with a much wider road. Well, the school bus comes through there and people park on the single lane area, and the school bus has actually gotten trapped in there a couple of times. And so the road, very narrow to begin with, which is good for neighborhood issues, but the issue is that the shoulder of the road then goes immediately into the ditch. And so Edward has given us an estimate of, I think, about $700,000 or something that included
curb and gutter.
Yeah,
right?
to do the curb and gutter section, which is what some of the people there want. And so this gravel shoulder at least would give us the room for the school bus to go around in the event that a car was parked there.
Good amount of on-street parking there as well.
Yeah, a lot of people park there. It's a great little neighborhood street, but it's really narrow in the school bus and the new connection over. So I know those are long-term, so I'm making my plea now. So.
We'll see you at citizen comments.
Yes, I will be at citizen comment.
All right,
I just wanted to point out one thing. At the board table tonight, we had a Sherwood drainage improvement. It's item 37 on our list, and it's already in it's already in there. But we had two different options, and this was the option that was supposed to actually be in the packet. But the other option got put on there, so I just wanted to make a note of this one that's on the table would be the one that I would like to actually put into the capital improvement project list. So I
Do
think
you have a motion?
it may be simpler for me to make the motion and say,
That's a great idea.
I move to approve the 2013-2015 capital improvement plan and authorization to advertise for bids for the 2013 capital improvement project, replacing item 13 on the Sherwood on the drainage improvement list with the estimate as presented at the table.
Alderman Parker has made a motion, and listen to me, Alderman Parker, to approve of the capital improvement project for fiscal year 2013 and the authorization to advertise for project bids, replacing item 13 as it was presented.
37.
Replacing item 37 as it was presented in the packet with the estimate that was presented at the table. Correct. Alderman Parker, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second that, and I've got a question right after that.
All right, motion's been seconded by Alderman Dumas. Alderman Parker, do you wish to speak on the merits? Alderman Dumas, your question.
There are two 37s. Do we
I
need
know
to take both of them off?
No, that's a misprint. One of them's 37, one of them's I think 38.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's Sherwood number 1.
So we would take off Sherwood number 1
And replace it with
and
this.
replace it with that.
So it's the actual 37.
Is that- yeah.
Well, they're both actually 37. It's what should have been 37.
So 237s, take off.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Thank you, Mr. Kent.
Thank you.
Excellent job.
Thank you, Mr. Kent.
The next matter on the agenda is the consideration of amending the Board of Aldermen policy on the adoption of ordinances to exempt the call for 2 public hearings for street renamings. Discussion. Alderman Cicero.
I'm going to make the motion for this, but I'm also going to, as we make this motion, to delete the section related to renaming of streets, because I believe that renaming streets is something that should be subject to public hearings. The acceptance of names for new streets certainly will streamline things if we exempt that from the public hearing process. So I move approval of modifying the public hearing for adoption of ordinances policy to exempt the acceptance of streets and amending the official municipal street map from the requirement of 2 public hearings.
Alderman Sistron, can you say as presented at the table, the version that Lynn placed at the table is the most recent version?
Well, it's as presented at the table here with my
With the
strike through.
exclusions, that's right.
Yeah, because there's 2 sections in this yellow that references,
Right.
renaming streets, and just to delete those. Can I pass that down to you?
All right, the motion made by Alderman Sistrunk is the approval of modifying the public hearing policy for adoption of ordinances to exempt the acceptance of streets and amending the official municipal street map from the requirement of 2 public hearings when that is the case,
As presented at the table.
as presented at the table with the writing submitted to the clerk. Alderman Sistrunk, is that your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second? The motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Sistrunk, you wish to speak on the merits?
No, again, all I'm doing is excluding the renaming, which I do think is something that the public should have an opportunity to weigh in on as we look at those issues.
Alderman Davis.
It was seconded, right?
It was.
Okay, bear with me, I may be confusing this with what he is, but we also have some other streets in the city that I think would retroactively benefit from us officially changing the name. Garrett, we didn't.
That's the next.
That's the next one.
So E would then
Do it all.
officially ratify all those, okay, good.
Every street in the city.
Good.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration for a calling of a public hearing on an ordinance adopting the official
Move approval.
municipal street map. Did that not go on consent?
No,
revised.
we just took the second one.
Motion has been made by Alderman Corey to call for a public hearing on an ordinance to adopt the official municipal street map. Alderman Corey, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Corey, do you wish to speak on the merits? Any discussion? Any discussion? Any
One
discussion?
point, Lynn, can you make sure that this includes Cotton Row and the Cotton District from being officially Hogan to Cotton Row?
I certainly can, and if you will note, you just changed the policy on this, so if y'all would like to go ahead and adopt it as an ordinance, you may do so this evening, just a
Alright.
note.
I like your
Ordinance.
efficiency. What do we
All
know?
right,
No,
the
we-
motion we are discussing is
excluded
calling a public
rename.
hearing.
We
This is
excluded.
not renaming, this is the official street map of it.
This is adopting everything you have done. You and every board in the history of the city of
Oh,
Starkville.
Corey struck the renaming
Right,
portion, so it is just,
Go either way, I just said
As,
hearing now.
yeah, just to be on the safe side, I would prefer we.
that's fine, however you want to do it, I just thought I'd note that.
All right, further discussion on Alderman Corey's motion. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Saying none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. The next matter on the agenda is the consideration calling for a public hearing on the landscape ordinance.
Move approval.
Alderman Dumas has made a motion to call for a public hearing on the amending of the landscape ordinance in City of Starkville Code of Ordinances, Chapter 112, Article 2. Alderman Dumas, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Dumas, you speak on the merits.
I do not.
Discussion. Alderman Carver.
I was just gonna ask, what's been changed?
There's several changes. We'll have a whole new, and there was actually one in there, document that we'll present to you at the public hearing.
Further discussion.
We'll like.
You like?
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. We'll now have a report from the Audit and Budget Committee.
Make it fast.
I can read really, really quickly. The Audit and Budget Committee met on Wednesday, February the 13th at 11:30 for our monthly meeting. On the agenda were Ms. Jamie Matt, who you heard this evening regarding a request for funding from Volunteer Starkville. She requested $1,000 to $1,500 level, and the board has approved the $500 level this evening. The Sanitation Environmental Service Building, Ms. Gandy brought to my attention that the building leaked, and we were debating or discussing the need to get that fixed. She's going to get some cost estimates and bring them back, and we'll see where we might be able to find some funding for that. The status of the audit was reported on by Mr. Adams. He indicated that the timing would be a little bit later due to some personnel issues that had transpired, but that the preliminary information would be forthcoming shortly, but the final audit would be pushed until later into the year. The Stennis salary study, Mr. Boyd provided the committee with an update on the municipal, county, and private entities with which he'd been in contact, and indicated that he would be ready to come forward to the next committee meeting with a full complement of data on which the committee could make a recommendation. And then tax collection, I spoke to the county administrator, Mr. Posey, indicating to him that we had not yet heard from the tax collector, and if he needed to give him a little incentive to go ahead and get us the information we needed to make a determination for this year's upcoming tax collection. He indicated that he would do so. And the Audit and Budget Committee voted to recommend to the board the motion that y'all have already passed for $500 to the three various entities. So.
And that's the remaining funds in that outside contribution?
Yes, in
with
the outside
the exception of a
contribution.
little bit that would be
Yes.
potentially used for
And
advertisements.
the committee also indicated that the GTPDD would send a letter for negative affirmation and to see if we could plan for the funds that were allocated at that time. So, any questions?
Questions or comments from Ms. Brewer? Seeing none, the next matter on the agenda is the request for approval of the fire department, the claims docket except for the fire department. Discussion.
Approval.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to approve of the claims docket except for the fire department as of February 14th, 2013, as presented. Alderman Dumas, that's your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion has been seconded by Alderman Parker. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Any discussion? Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. By a vote of 5 in favor with 2 against, this measure passes. The next matter on the agenda,
Move that we go into closed session to determine the need of an executive session.
no, you're not there yet.
No,
I
sanitation.
rescind my motion.
First, we've got a report on the impending EPA regulatory action.
I'll try to be as brief as I can. It's been a long meeting. Just to give you a quick summary of how we got to where we are right now. The Federal Clean Water Act has a lot of provisions in it that people or systems in the whole country have to comply with. And typically, the state agencies are the ones who administer and regulate and enforce the provisions of the Clean Water Act. I was kind of surprised to see the federal government coming in and doing audits in the state of Mississippi on all municipalities who have treatment plants that are 10 million gallons a day or higher. They came in and did that audit about 3 weeks ago. And they were monitoring our collection system, how well we manage our collection system, which is the pipes, the series of pipes. And one thing they were focused on was the amount of sanitary sewer overflows that we reported over the last 5 years to the DEQ. If you remember, overflows anytime a manhole overflows in the sanitary sewer effluent gets on the surface of the ground. What came as a shock at the end of the meeting, of the wrap-up meeting with the federal officials, and it also came as a shock to the DEQ regulators who were in attendance, kind of monitoring what the federal government was doing. We were informed that we were going to be forced to pay fines and penalties for sanitary sewer overflows that occurred over the past 5 years. So in other words, they're going to enforce this retroactively. Typically, when the state of Mississippi comes into your municipality and sees these kind of things, they will do what's called an agreed order. An agreed order is basically you work with the DEQ, you lay out a plan of improvements over several years that you can afford. And as long as you meet those guidelines, then there's no fines or penalties. So this came as a total shock. So that being said, sometime in March, we're going to have a conference call with the federal regulators in Atlanta, and Mr. Latimer will be invited to attend as well, the conference call, and we'll be discussing or negotiating the fines and penalties that will be imposed on the city of Starkville. Obviously, this news is going to result in a huge change in the way we do business as far as managing our collection system. The old method is we looked at sewer overflows as just in going and taking care of them as kind of a cost of doing business, keep our rates low, not have to raise rates to do other things. But now with this regulation, if you have one overflow in any 1 month, just one, you're going to be, the EPA is going to impose a fine on us. So it's going to take a lot of work on the city's part, and then also it's going to take a lot of help from the public, our customers, in regard to grease, the deposits of grease into the sanitary sewer system. As we talked about at the last meeting, I believe it was the last meeting or the one before, when we talked about capital improvements we're going to do in relation to Carver Drive and the Woodland Heights area. Primary cause of overflows are obstructions, and the two being roots and grease, and the two really work together to cause most of the problems. So that being said, we're going to have to more aggressively enforce our grease ordinance of people depositing grease into the city sewer system. This could be a politically sensitive topic, so I did want to advise you that we are starting to do this now. We've basically contacted 4 business establishments in town over the last 6 to 8 weeks and sent them notice of ordinance violation. So this is going to be happening more and more. You might be getting some phone calls, some calls from certain businesses and that thing. But what I tell them is we can't do business like the way we used to in the city of Starkville. And we're either going to have to enforce these or we're going to be paying fines. And either way, the customers end up paying for these things in the end, whether they're fines or capital improvements or whatever. So anyway, that's where we are. As soon as I have more news about the extent of the fines and penalties, I'll be giving you an update on that figure. And then it may be after we have that conference call with them that we know the exact amount. But anyway, that's it. If you have any questions at this point, I'd be happy to answer them.
I've got some questions, Doug. Do we know what the fine will be?
Not yet, not yet.
Do we know how the fine's calculated?
There's a formula in those standards in the Clean Water Act. It's very complicated. There's a lot of economic impact.
It's not a Manning's equation, is it?
No,
Okay.
no, I wish it was that
See,
simple.
I remember something from last board meeting now.
Yeah, I wish it was that simple. but-
Well, can we determine where, is it only for grease and fats and oils, or is it just overflows in general?
Oh, that will get the fines?
Right.
It's any kind of
Just
overflow,
any type of
regardless of
overflow.
the
Okay.
cost. Right.
But obviously, our enforcement mechanism would be the discharge of fats, oils, and
Right,
grease. That
right.
will be a problem.
Yeah, and we've got work we've got to do too with the roots and things like that.
So other than the obvious of just seeing that somebody has dumped something there, do we
Right.
know, do we have any way of investigating or knowing?
Yeah, we have to make, we have to be positive that we know the source before we'll cite someone for ordinance violation. Usually this will be a service line coming directly into a manhole from a business, and it's there,
So
we
you
get a,
know
we
it's
get a
there.
picture, yeah, we get a
Gotcha.
photograph and send that with the notification that Jeff Lyles sends as well.
And so this being a sanitary sewer, this isn't someone just going out and dumping it into a storm grate. I mean, they're just pouring it down their drain, or?
Yeah, like, I'll give an example, like a restaurant, fast food restaurant that has a lot of fry cooking going on. The newer restaurants that come to town are building codes require them to put a grease interceptor. So, it just basically collects all the grease before it goes to the sanitary sewer system. And then they maintain that and they have the grease hauled away. So this, what was your question again?
I'm guessing they just,
Tired.
I mean, so it's just customary for them to just walk out, or not walk out, but just pour it down the drain, grease?
Some places it is, yes.
All
We've had some restaurants that were grandfathered in, that have the vats outside, where they're supposed to take it at the end of the day and put it in the
Right.
vats, and the collector comes and
gets it.
comes again, but.
That's
but,
what I'm used
yeah,
to seeing. Yeah.
But anyway, sometimes that happens, and then sometimes when the weather's cold, they just dump it down the sink, and it ends up causing problems. So, it just, to answer your question, it's from putting it down the sink most of the time.
Well, good luck, and thanks for letting us know.
Well,
And it's
This'll be a
generally
big-
commercial, not residential, right?
Pardon me?
Generally commercial, not.
That's generally where the
quantities
problems
would
come
be.
from, yeah.
And just to clarify, they weren't singling Starkville out. This is a mandate.
Yeah, any municipality that has a treatment permit of over 10 million gallons a day and larger is gonna be audited, and, a lot depends on how well they report their overflows. We hear, we're transparent. As soon as we know there's an overflow, we report it to the DEQ, like we're supposed to. But the bad news is those who didn't report them are gonna pay less fines and penalties than we did. It's just, no good deed goes unpunished, so that's just the way it works, so. But anyway, it is what it is, and as soon as we know more as far as the financial impact, we'll give you an update at that time, so.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
Devlin. The next and final matter on the agenda is the request for authorization to adopt the rate scale.
Move approval.
Motion has been made by Alderman Dumas to adopt the rate scale for dumping by the ton at the landfill as presented. Alderman Dumas, that's your motion?
Yes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion been seconded by Alderman Sistrunk. Alderman Dumas, you wish to speak on the merits?
No.
Discussion. Alderman Carver.
I don't know if anybody else on this board, I've been contacted by several people, Emma knows I've thought about this, people getting, has anybody else been contacted by, they're going from $30 a load to $300 or $400, I know that's less than the other 2 or 3 landfills in the surrounding area, but has anybody else been contacted about this?
I have
Anybody
not.
complaining?
No?
Yeah, that's what Emma said, the load's gonna go from what, $50 to $700 a load difference?
It depends on the time.
Yeah, I think that's pretty steep and significant to put on local contractors, and we're all about, promoting local business and things like that, but it's pretty, imagine if one of y'all drove a dump truck for a living, your load rate went from $50 to $700 per load. Is that still gonna be cheaper than everybody around? Is that?
That's still gonna be cheaper than the local, if you look at what I put in the package, that's still cheaper than the local, landfill sites. Those within a 50-mile radius that, I presented to you.
What about residents? Are residents still allowed to bring anything?
Residents are, yes.
If for no, they can bring like.
They're exempt. Residents are exempt from the fees.
Well, there is in that document, there's a flat rate of $5. What I have experienced since I've been there is that a lot of residents will hire someone to come in and cut down their tree. And either we pick it up, which is a violation because tree cutting is a major trimming in the ordinance, say that we're not doing a major trimming. Or the resident brings it in himself at no cost. Well, the landfill is designed to support itself. And we have to put a limit, or it would be nice to put a base fee onto loads coming into landfill, regardless of whether it's commercial or residential. Of course, that's the board decision, whatever the board decides
decides to do, we'll follow that. But I am asking the board to set a base of $5.
Further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Well, no.
I know I seconded it.
Were there any nays, Alderman Carver? Was it a nay or yay?
No, it was a yay.
Okay, so motion carries unanimously.
Hey, if we're gonna be cheaper than everybody around.
Was that a legitimate nay?
It was a legitimate nay, and
Oh.
my husband is not allowed to go to the landfill anymore.
Okay.
He's gonna put it out for curbside pickup.
I
so.
thought you were sending a nay in Alderman Carver's direction. So it does indeed pass by a measure of 6-1. No, you can't
It'll
do
be
that. I
out
was
for
just trying
curbside
to sort
pickup
it
as
out.
opposed to.
All right, you've got an update on pending litigation for executive session. Your choice whether you want to hear it or not.
Let's hear it while we're here.
Let's get it out of the way. I move we close the closed session and discuss need for executive session.
All right, motion's been made by Alderman Corey to go into closed session to determine whether there's need for executive session. I believe this is a record for executive session.
Y'all all know the news.
Having contractors come
Do I hear a second? Second. Motion's been seconded by Alderman Dumas. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes.
We don't need it. Oh, well then, that's not calling executive session.
Oh, you're in closed session. Make a motion to come out and go to regular.
It's just McGovern, y'all know,
Okay.
dismissed. Case
In that case, I move we come out of closed session.
Alderman Corey's made a motion to come out of a closed session. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Motion's been seconded by Alderman Vaughn. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure clearly passes. Now back in the regular agenda for adjournment on March 5th. Do I hear a motion?
I say we stand adjourned until March 5th, 2013 at 5:30 at City Hall.
Now, Alderman Corey's made a motion to stand adjourned until March 5th, 2013, 5:30 at 101 Lampkin Street, City Hall courtroom. Alderman Corey, is that your motion?
It is.
Do I hear a second? Do I hear a second? Second. Motion's been seconded by Alderman Dumas. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying nay. Measure passes. We stand in adjournment.